if you look at the percentage of somebody's trip, the percentage of the cost that's spent on the experiences, it's interesting how it's usually a pretty small percent of the cost of a trip, but a huge percentage of the impact of a trip. And so that suggests to
Yeah.
me that as people, if there's economic distress, as they maybe have to cut that back a little bit, they're much more likely to cut back on their lodging than they are to cut back on the experiences they can do. Now, 10 years ago, I don't think that was true. I think the experiences market, if you will, has changed the way that people think about traveling. It's just a whole different world. So I feel
Mhm.
very strongly that leisure travel, the in real life, the human interaction part of it is actually going to be more and more important.
Welcome to the Best Part of Travel podcast, brought to you by Arival, where we take you inside the business of destination experiences. I'm Janelle Visser, and I'm here with Stephen Joyce.
Hi.
And today, we're going to be kicking off the year by digging into trends with travel industry veteran Erik Blachford. We'll talk everything from AI to summer camp and what's next for the future of experiences. So, to kick things off, Stephen, what is your favorite summer camp story? You've been to summer camp, right?
Oh, yeah. When I was in school, I went to summer camp every year between grade 8 and grade 12. It's my favorite time of year. I loved summer camp. I think my favorite memory actually was going up to the Yukon for the first time. I was in the Air Cadet program, and the summer camp that I participated in was called Air Crew Survival. So it was a survival camp where we basically had to learn survival skills. And one of my favorite memories was basically our survival test at survival camp was we had to spend 3 days with a partner in like isolated from everyone else. And we had to survive for 3 days on 1 day's worth of rations. And I think my favorite experience of that was that 3 day, just like being completely isolated, having no other people. And it was one of the most satisfying and most enriching experiences I think I've ever had. It gave me the confidence after that, like to be able to survive in the woods for 3 days, finding our own water and all of that sort of stuff. It was really an amazing experience. I'll never forget it. And it's still etched in my mind decades later. How about you, Janelle? What's your favorite summer camp story?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. It's so hard. I went to summer camp too as a kid, and I also, one of my first jobs was working at a summer camp. And it's so hard to pick one, but this came up recently actually because I met someone else who went to a summer camp near the summer camp I went to. And so one of the stories that would be told around the campfire at my summer camp was about Camp Echo, which was a summer camp over there. And if you yelled loud enough, you could hear them yelling back to you. That's why it was called Camp Echo, and the kids loved it. But I met someone who went to a summer camp near the summer camp I went to, and we realized in talking to each other that it was Camp Echo, like for real. So her summer camp had the same story. It was a different summer camp. It was a different location, but it was close enough by that I was like, wait, your summer camp is located here? You guys are Camp Echo. And she was like, no, you guys are Camp Echo.
You're Camp Echo.
I had always thought as a super smart 15, 16-year-old camp counselor that Camp Echo was joke that we told the kids, but it was, and it was also totally real.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
And back then, the only way you could communicate with Camp Echo was to yell at them from across
Really
the
loudly.
bay.
Yes.
I love that. I remember actually one of the things I remember at summer camp, we had designated times that we could call home. And there was only one telephone, and you had to take turns using the telephone. And you had 15 minutes, and that was it. Otherwise, you spent the rest of your time just with people. It was, we need more of that.
Yeah, we do. More real life experiences. And we're going to talk about that. We'll introduce Erik in a minute, but first, a message from our podcast sponsor.
Protect Group offers a service called Refund Protect. The way it works is that an operator or reseller offers Refund Protect at the time of checkout for an extra fee, usually around 10% of the ticket price. If the guest can't go because of some unforeseen circumstance, they request a refund through Refund Protect and they get 100% of their money back. including the fee. The best part is the operator keeps 100% of their revenue and they make a little extra. So to find out more, go to protect.group/best part of travel.
All right, so let's get into it. We're talking today to Erik Blachford. And how do you even introduce Erik? He's had so many titles. Like, how do we introduce Erik?
I think he's most commonly known as one of the first CEOs of Expedia. After Richard Barton was Erik Blachford. And so I think he's probably most famous in the travel industry in general for that. But he's done so much more since then. He was a CEO of Butterfield and Robinson, which is a very, very popular, well-known brand in the adventure travel space. He's on a variety of different boards as a board member. That's his thing now, is advising boards and being an advisor to companies. That, and he's just a really great guy and also a fellow Canadian. So we do love our Canadian travel executives.
Yeah, there we go. And so I'm excited to talk to Erik because he was one of the people on stage and at the executive summit that Arival did, the executive summit on the future of experiences. And this time of year, people are always talking about trends and what's next. And so it's great that we get him to ourselves for a little while to ask him what's top of mind for him going into the new year, what's next, and what should people be thinking about as we go forward.
Yeah, let's jump in. It's a great interview.
Let's get into it. So thank you, Erik, so much for being here. Why don't we kick things off with an easy question? What's the most unusual travel experience you've ever had, whether that's personally or like a professional trip?
Oh, that's not an easy question.
Oh, okay.
I think I'll pick one. I mean, I've had a lot of different unusual experiences because I've done a bunch of adventure travel in all kinds of different places. I would say I'll pick one. I was with Richard Bangs, the father of adventure travel, and we were going by the north route into the base camp of Annapurna, and we got caught in a blizzard, which is not really a situation you want to be in. And our Sherpas, who were fantastic, came up to us and basically said, "Do you guys know which trail we should take down?" We said, "No, you're supposed to know the trail that we're supposed to take down." So they said, "Oh, no, one of the Sherpas does. Don't worry." But he already went down. So we ended up pitching a tent and put 12 of us inside a tent and waited for the blizzard to slowly come up. And by the time the thing finally, everybody ended up fine. By the end of it, we started poking out of the tent, looking right at snow level, trying to think, how are we going to get down from here? Right. But we did in the end. It all worked out okay. But that's off the top of my head. That's probably one of the strangest.
That's
certainly memorable.
Yeah.
Nothing like shared near-death experience to really kind of solidify that memory.
It was the perfect thing where it felt much riskier than it turned out to be, which is what adventure travel was all about. Yeah. You want it to feel risky, but actually not to really be all that risky.
Yeah, that's true. And you got to experience that with Richard Bangs too. So that's pretty memorable.
Everything goes better with Bangs. Yep.
Yeah, I have a shirt that says "I desire medium danger." So I think that's the vibe.
Perfect. Perfect.
I want to feel the adrenaline, but I also want to know that the bungee cord is for sure going to hold. Yeah.
There's got to be a safety harness. Absolutely. It's just as fun.
It sounds like you've had a pretty adventurous life so far. Do you want to walk us through, maybe give us some background on where you came from and how you got to where you are?
Sure, I could give you the quick overtake. So I came out of college, didn't have any money, and I really wanted to travel. And so I got a job as a bike tour guide. And that's how I ended up in the travel industry. I really just wanted a way to go travel all over Europe, which I did, working for a company called Butterfield and Robinson, based out of Toronto, and had a wonderful experience doing that. It was just sort of the dawn of that kind of group travel, active travel thing. It turned out the Berlin Wall fell right around the same time, 1989. I'm that old. And I somehow got the nod to go into Eastern Europe and set up the first walking tours. And so I ended up in my early 20s writing sort of guidebooks to Krakow and Warsaw and Prague. And I was there often the first Canadian anybody had ever run into, sitting around kitchen tables, chatting, but telling stories of the West to folks. A little village, I was on my bike a lot of the time, and I'd be at a kitchen table, and the village would call in the one person who spoke some English, and everybody else would huddle around. And I would say, yes, I'm from Montreal. We have great bagels or something. And translate, everybody would listen. Oh my God, that's so interesting. Anyway, I took that and realized afterwards, after that for a few years, that it was pretty hard to get a job as a bike tour guide, except as a bike tour guide. Turned out nobody was really interested in hiring me for anything else. I had a theater major under my belt, and that didn't help either. So I went to business school, and coming out of that, after a year or two, a business school friend of mine was working at MSN, which is Microsoft, and they were starting up a travel project, which of course became Expedia. And somehow the fact that I was interested in the internet, had a business school degree, and was in the travel industry allowed me to actually join that team. Moved to Seattle, put in 10 years there, ran the marketing there, ended up as the second CEO after Rich Barton. We sold the company to IAC under Barry Diller, put together hotels.com, Hotwire, a bunch of others. Then after that, when the company spun out public, Derek Khosrowshahi took over, who's now the CEO at Uber. And I headed off thinking I would do startup stuff. Went and ran a company called TerraPass that did carbon offsets and environmental consulting. And then went back to Butterfield and Robinson. It's a plot twist after the great financial crisis, and helped pull them through that. Worked there again as a CEO for 2 or 3 years. And then came out of that and decided, okay, what's the next adventure? Went into the investing world at TCV, which is a pretty well-known late-stage venture capital player in the Valley. I did that part-time while doing my MFA in playwriting and fiction writing part-time at San Francisco State. So I did that for quite a while. And then when the pandemic came around, thought, okay, I'm going to put more time into startup investing. But then the pandemic being the pandemic, that kind of blew up a lot of those ideas. And I decided after a while that what I really wanted to do was do what I really got a big kick out of, which is sitting on boards and advising companies, both in travel and out. And so that's pretty much what I do now. Some of the boards most people would have heard of. I'm still on the Zillow board. I was on the Peloton board for quite a while. I'm the chairman at BusBud. I'm also on HipCamp, Fora Travel, the Adventure Travel Trade Association. I've never cut the link to the adventure travel world. It's very important to me. And I don't know if maybe we're going to talk about AI a bit. I love the outdoors, and I think it's really important for people to get to the outdoors. The other thing that I do is I own a summer camp in Quebec. It's called Camp Nominang. It's about 2.5 hours north of Montreal, which is where I grew up. And about 500 kids a summer go through there. No screens, no tech, no nothing. Just learn how to paddle a boat and make a fire. And I think that's really important stuff too. So anyway, that's the quick version of everything.
I love that. I love that
That
history.
sounds amazing.
Yeah. And it all started as a bike tour guide. And,
That's right.
that's so many people, like, especially after university, are thinking about what do they want to do and how can they pursue what it is they're passionate about. And everybody's so focused, especially now, like everybody's so focused on you have to get a career, you have to find that thing that you do and drive towards that thing. And it's like travel is one of those avenues to discovering what you're passionate about. And it can lead you in so many different places, literally and figuratively, but also it opens your world and your eyes up to possibilities that you wouldn't otherwise have. And I think you're a perfect example of that. Just the fact that you've been able to experience the things that you do because of your journey through travel, like it's amazing. So kudos to you, and leading probably one of the premier brands in travel as well.
Yeah, you pretty quickly skipped over. Oh yeah, and then I was the CEO of Expedia for a while.
People have heard the story of the Expedia journey, but if you want more detail, so we grew it up as the Microsoft Travel project for a while, and I got there just as we decided to put it on the internet instead of on a CD-ROM. So
I remember. I'm that old too. I'm that old too, Eric. I remember. I remember it on CD.
We came up with the Expedia name after we tried out a few real clunkers. Believe it or not, we actually thought for a while. Imagine if we had launched Microsoft Control with a K. We actually thought about that as one of the names. I know. We were young. We didn't know anything yet. Anyway, then we got the company out public in 1999, right before things crashed. But Expedia was an actual business that had actual revenue and gross margins. So we survived that and thrived afterwards. So it was amazing being part of that journey. I was the charge of marketing for most of the time, and really got a huge kick out of Expedia.com, all that stuff. It was just super fun to put out in the world.
That sounds amazing. The glory days. CD-ROM,
Right.
or this new thing called the internet.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. It's really fun to be actually in a spot where you're surfing those waves of change, right? Everybody right now, we were just talking about people coming out of college. Wow.
Yeah.
Is this ever another one of those moments, right? Where everybody is trying to figure out, okay, what's this all going to mean? Where's this wave going to go? And the kind of, slightly scary, but also really interesting thing is that nobody knows. And that just doesn't come along all that often. I feel it's kind of neat to actually be in another one of these because it's a pretty different time right now. And I think if you're 22 or 23 years old, yeah, definitely go work as a bike tour guide because there's no better thing to do. But it's a different context now than it was back then, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And so that's a good segue to talking a little bit about the executive summit, because you were on the executive summit, Arrival's executive summit, and we're going to be doing another one in Valencia. And some of what you've mentioned, AI, this new kind of era of technology, as well as this urge to get back out into nature, are both things that were discussed there. So let's talk a little bit about that. But before we talk about like the trends or like mega trends, I wanted to ask you, because we hear a lot about trends this time of year, especially. And what do you think from the business perspective is the point of talking about trends? Like, why do we need to be paying attention to this in the first place?
You decide making resolutions, see if we can keep them. I don't know how you guys are doing.
We have some thoughts on that.
I think we also run a narrative, right? We all like to be around the campfire and compare notes on stuff and trends, whether it be sort of a formal kind of forecast or whether it just be people talking about what they're seeing. Everybody likes some validation and some affirmation that they're not crazy at what they're seeing and what they're thinking. And I think the trends really only work well as a topic when they're batted around among a bunch of different people. Hey, are you seeing this? But I'm seeing more of that. That is really interesting. Everybody in the business world, of course, you want as much certainty as you can get going forward so you know how to plan. How many people should you hire? Where should you put your resources? It's pretty basic stuff. I think it's one of the reasons that some of the policy landscape is really difficult for folks, especially around tariffs. If you're in manufacturing, something like that, you don't have that kind of certainty. And trends are just another way of saying, hey, can we all agree on a perceived version of what the future is going to look like over this time frame? And if we can, then we can all feel more comfortable as we make our plans. If I were to say, I think there's a big trend, more and more people are going to be using AI as the top of the funnel for searching for their leisure travel. If enough people say that, after a while, you start to realize, okay, probably everybody is seeing the same thing. Maybe that is happening. I guess I should put some more resources into that so that I don't get left behind. And there is a weird self-fulfilling kind of prophecy that ends up coming up. The next thing you know, they're charging you for the traffic. No, I haven't started that yet, but it's only a matter of time.
It's only a matter of time, yeah. They've got to monetize it, right? They've spent billions on this thing. They've got to make their money back somehow.
Yeah, one of the points that I tried to make at the summit, I said to everybody, if you're feeling a lot of pressure to use AI in your business, it's because it's holding the whole American economy up, basically, right now. And everybody is saying, you have to find a way to use AI. We need the killer app. We need this to work. And I'm very uncomfortable with that because I think it's not fair to push that down on all these businesses. But at the same time, if it's inspiring people to put more tools out there for people to experiment with, then that's a good thing. But I think there is a lot of pressure right now around AI. And I think people are coming up with lots of good ideas, but I think lots of ideas that are probably not all that well thought through as well, which is too bad, but that's the way it always goes in situations like this.
So, $1 million question. Will AI finally result in a killer travel planning app?
Oh, there's certainly a lot of entrepreneurs right now who think it will. It doesn't seem to matter what the technology is. That's always the question, right?
Yeah.
I remember being pitched over and over again back when Facebook launched. Hey, here's a travel planning app that can use other people's photos to plan your trip. I'd be like, the last thing anybody wants to use is other people's photos to plan their own trip. And the AI thing strikes me as a bit the same thing. It's clearly people want advice, and clearly every survey in history says friends and family advice is the thing that you value most. So if the AI can become a trusted voice, like the editorial voice or friends and family, it will be one of the voices. But the idea that suddenly people are going to change the way they think about travel planning and magically want to do everything off a connected calendar or something, it would have happened already. AI is not the thing that's going to do it. for whatever reason, we are messy in our travel planning. When it comes to
Yeah.
leisure travel, what all these companies keep missing is the fact that part of the fun of travel, part of the story you're telling yourself is you did the research. You
Yeah.
had the
Yes.
fun of thinking, hey, would that be cool? Would that be cool? That's part of it. That's part of the whole journey. And it's way more fun if you do your own research and you figure that out for yourself than if somebody just drops you in and says, enjoy that.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Stephen and I have talked about this a fair bit, actually. And there's studies that show that you actually get as much joy out of the travel planning process as the trip
Mhm.
itself. Like you get a dopamine hit every time you book something, every time you confirm something. That whole process gives you almost as much, if not as much joy as the actual trip. And so
I
to take that
couldn't
away
couldn't
and
agree more.
yeah,
Yep.
to take that away and outsource it to an AI, it's okay, like you're missing half the fun of it.
Yeah.
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 Now,
Exactly.
I will say that there's another kind of travel, which I might call unmanaged business travel, which is the
Mm.
thing where it's fairly routine. There's actually not that much fun in planning. In fact, planning is just a task that you have to get done. And so I do think there is a line where there's a bunch of stuff there, which right now, a lot of people may, if they're corporate, they might use an agent. Smaller business, if they have an assistant, they might do the travel planning for them. It's because there isn't a lot of decision making to be made. There's just a bunch of boxes to check. Now
Yeah.
that I actually can see, definitely, I can see AI. Auto is a company that launched pretty recently that's doing a bunch of small business travel. I don't think they're doing experiences. I think it's just aimed at flight and hotel, but I can see that sort of thing a little easier. But the kind of the experiences world, again, it's very difficult for me to imagine a world where people say, yeah, I'm thinking about going to London, and then with one prompt, and then the whole thing comes back fully fleshed out in a 3-day itinerary, and people just say, yeah, great, I'm going to do it. It doesn't seem intuitive to me.
No, it really is about the discovery and the joy of discovery. I think is a huge part of it. So let's jump in a little bit about, since we're talking about trends, and I admit we did digress with the travel planning there.
No, it's okay.
But
That's all right. It's all
to jump
related.
back into the
Yeah.
to jump back into the trends, some of the things that we talked about at the executive summit, and I'll run through a couple of the trends that we sort of identified in both in the report that has come out from the executive summit, but also what we just talked about at the summit. Some of the key trends were things like AI and the shift that's causing, inequality in the economy. I think that's a really interesting topic to think about, is that we've identified in recent studies that affluent travelers are driving the bulk of spend in travel. And to me, that's concerning because we're shifting towards travel as a privilege more now, and that concerns me a little bit. We're looking at what the new traveler mindset is, the climate and impact on climate and crowds and over tourism, as well as just like, how do we get back to in real life experiences and the in real life components of the travel experience, rather than this overwhelming need to focus on digitalization and the digital experience. So those are some of the things that we talked about. Is there anything in those trends that really stands out to you that you want to talk about?
Sure. Look, it's a unique moment in time. I guess every moment in time is unique, but it does seem to me that if you look out over the horizon of 2 or 3 years right now, the confluence of AI doing what it's going to do, and we can talk about that in a sec, and climate tipping points really coming closer and bumping into this idea of over tourism, you do have this two big trend. Oh, and by the way, the third big trend, which certainly over the next 3 years, the increasingly kind of anti-tourism bent of the current administration, which doesn't seem to be a fee that they don't like to charge to international traveler. Here's $100 to go to a national park. Here's 250. The proposal to search 5 years of social media history. It's very difficult, right? So operators, especially if they're operating in the US, are really trying to figure out where are all these different things going to go and how do they interrelate? And I think that interrelationship of all these things that is a big macro trend, is that nothing is going to be the same as it was 3 years ago, 3 years from now. And the timeframes are really compressing pretty quickly. And I'll take AI just as a jumping off point, because everybody, of course, is talking about it. And I would say it's one of those things, it's the rare sort of triple-edged sword, because almost every operator I know of any scale has a story to tell now about how they figured out how to save some cost by replacing human labor with AI. And a lot of the time it's customer service, but it also might be something to do with their accounting. Or there's a bunch of different places. I think we've all seen people saving on legal fees by using AI to do first drafts. If you're a small business, it's wow, what a great gift, right? Because you do all this sort of great saving. At the same time, what we're not hearing about so much right now, I think very deliberately on the case of the AI companies, is what about all those people who used to do that? What are they going to do? Because I do think we are at the front end of a big labor displacement. When I was growing up in the 80s, NAFTA was going through, and I was actually in Canada. I grew up in Montreal, like I said, but still, we were part of the debate all the way. And we saw everything that happened as all those manufacturing jobs went away. And there just wasn't enough time to retrain people into doing other jobs right away. And people lost their pensions. And Billy Joel wrote Allentown, and all of that stuff was happening. And it was this move from the theory of what would happen when NAFTA made it much cheaper to manufacture in Mexico and so on, to the reality of all those people getting thrown out of their factory jobs and not having anything else to do. Now, I just feel like we're going to see that across the whole economy. And we talked about the trend in travel, the sort of bifurcation of, I guess, what they're calling the K-shaped economy. I really worry for the mid-tier of the travel industry because, yeah, you can save all the money you want using AI, but if AI is putting your whole customer base out of work, it doesn't really matter how much money you're saving because your customer base is going to go away. And I don't hear around the travel industry enough attention being paid to that sort of crucial issue. I don't think that the high end has anything to worry about at all. It's very clear the rewards of AI are going to just flow straight upstream. And I think it's a bunch of specialized travel where people have to do it. And so that's not going to be affected either. But a whole lot of discretionary travel counts on all those people who are going to be systematically put out of work. So I wouldn't be a bit surprised, if you want to make a prediction, if we're sitting here 3 years from now and we think AI is one of the worst things that ever happened in the travel business because of the evaporation of that sort of layer of white collar workers who otherwise would be taking their 2 or 3 annual trips with their families and now simply can't afford to because I guess there might be universal basic income from the American government. I'm not gonna
really
given that we can't seem to get our heads around supply Medicaid. I doubt it, but just trying to get a reaction on that one. So anyway,
You are talking.
You are talking to 2 Canadians.
So.
Okay, also true. But anyway, that's the confluence of stuff, and so AI is scrambling the eggs for sure. And then the other thing I would say, just to riff on the thing a bit, is we're facing obviously a big over tourism problem, and I guess I'd call it almost an over concentration problem, which actually Arival has done a bunch of work on this. The sort of I'm going to forget the stats, but I think some huge percentage of visitors in Paris go to a very small number of attractions. And of course, intuitively, that's right. And who knows, the fact of climate change making it more and more impossible to visit certain places at certain times of year, maybe that's going to be a little bit of a cure for the over tourism thing. And also a big sort of worldwide recession, much as I hate to see it, that actually might be a little bit of a cure for that too. There might be a bit of self-correction. But if you're in the business of providing experiences, you don't love over tourism, but it's probably rather that than the alternative of nobody showing up. So I think it's a very tricky time especially if you're operating at scale in multiple markets. The guys operating the big bus tours, that sort of thing. It's very tricky to plan forward right now. And I really do. I sympathize. I think it's a difficult time for budgeting for this year, but also 27 and forward. It's tough.
But so that makes me think, because we talked about the trip planning thing and how people still want to do that themselves. Like within travel and within travel experiences, there's so many aspects of it that you need and want a human for. Part of it is the human experience of meeting other humans in other cultures, not a robot with a different accent. So
oh God,
like how are there some aspects of the experiences sector in particular that are maybe a little bit more insulated because of the human element of it?
Yes. There's a bunch of ways in which I think there's insulation there. Actually, it's a good point to bring up. So I guess I should say, first of all, I couldn't agree with you more that the human element is the thing that is most important about travel. Again, we're talking about leisure travel here. We're talking about the kind of travel people go to learn more about themselves. I tend to think of that kind of travel as art. It is about human connection. It is about learning something from the people you're interacting with, as opposed to the more like commerce travel, which is a lot of business travel where you have to
Yeah.
show up for something. And so I actually think it's quite important because art is very important to people. And the other thing is, if you look at the percentage of somebody's trip, the percentage of the cost that's spent on the experiences, it's interesting how it's usually a pretty small percent of the cost of a trip, but a huge percentage of the impact of a trip. And so that suggests to
Yeah.
me that as people, if there's economic distress, as they maybe have to cut that back a little bit, they're much more likely to cut back on their lodging than they are to cut back on the experiences they can do. Now, 10 years ago, I don't think that was true. I think the experiences market, if you will, has changed the way that people think about traveling so that certainly 10, 15 years ago, when people landed in a place they wanted to visit, they knew they'd have to spend a little money on a museum ticket or something, or they might find something at the hotel and make a last minute decision to take a bus thing. The new world, though, is that people actually are thinking hard about what are the experiences I could have in that city, and I'm gonna make sure about that first, and then I'm gonna worry about where am I gonna stay, where am I gonna eat, and this inversion of people realizing, okay, if I allocate a little bit of my budget, I can get a way better experience. I will have a way better trip. I will learn more about myself and about the place that I'm in. And the fact that that's so prevalent now and so accepted, you guys remember 10 years ago, it was a little dodgy almost to sign up for a trip and someone's going to show you graffiti. Really? Are you going to walk around town with them? They're not just going to take your money and run, right? Now, of course, it's not only that, but there's 5 people to choose from and most of them have got MFAs, right? It's just a whole different world. So I feel very strongly that leisure travel, the in real life, the human interaction part of it is actually going to be more and more important. And I would actually even redouble it in that, boy, if we think we're tired of being on screens now, wait till half of our coworkers are AI. God, it's going to be fantastic to leave it all behind. I'm already tired of talking about AI all the time. I shouldn't say that. They might be listening. But so anyway, I totally agree with you. I think it's very important, and I think the economics say it's probably the last thing people cut out of their travel too.
Yeah. And so that brings us back to this idea of the in real life trend or thing that you had on the list from the executive summit. And you were mentioning how you help run a summer camp where kids aren't allowed phones. And when I went to summer camp, I'm not as
right.
we like that wasn't even a thing. I'm not that old, am I?
Cell phones weren't a thing yet.
Yeah, can you speak a little bit to that and that sense of what's driving people to get rid of their phones for a while? People really want to disconnect.
They really do. I'll tell you, just as a funny sort of stat, it used to be that we would open up our rates and dates in November for the following summer, and we would see a sort of a slow progression of bookings building with a big spike kind of after the holidays when the families got together and realized, whoa, this time of year, we have nothing going on for the summer. Now, since the pandemic, as soon as we open up those dates, we sell about half the season in the first couple of weeks. Yeah, which is markedly different. And we're convinced it's because the pandemic was the thing that really showed parents, because they were home with their kids, watching their kids on the screens all day. And it really showed parents like, wow, this is not good. This is not how childhood is supposed to be lived. And camp, even if you go for a week, if you're a little kid, but a lot of kids go for 3 weeks, it's an opportunity to relearn how to be with people face to face in real life, using your hands to do stuff. You're bored. It's okay. You could be bored. You can actually read a book. It's a completely different kind of experience from doing everything through your paper, made of paper.
You can
get a knife and you can whittle yourself a little canoe or something, stuff that feels very old timey. But actually, guess what? Kids loved it 50 years ago and kids love it today. It's the same. Kids haven't really changed. It's just all the stuff around them that's changed. And so we've got this sort of responsibility now where we made a decision, by the way, I've only camped about 10 years. So we made a decision early on that as more and more kids had phones and stuff, we said, we're just going to be hardcore, total zero tolerance on this. And so we take everybody's phones away as soon as they get to camp. And then the first night we do a sweep through the tent line and all the kids who think they're so clever and smuggle in a second phone. We kick those too, right? The first morning, and the kids, by the way, is between 7 and 15. This holds true for all the age groups. The first mornings, the kids get together and they talk a lot about, if only I had my phone, I could show you. And there's a lot of phantom grabbing for phones and so forth. And that persists through much of that first day. The second morning, it's as though they never even owned a phone because now they've all bonded with each other in real life. And the only world that matters to them is the world that they're inhabiting there at camp. And it's just magical. And that's the experience they get out of it. And that's the experience that we're trying really hard to present too. So even our counselors aren't allowed to have phones or tech anywhere that a camper could possibly see it. The only exception is obviously emergencies every now and again, but otherwise we're very hardcore about it. And a lot of parents point out it's the only stretch of the whole year that the kids aren't on screens. And that to me is scary, right? I look at some of the stuff that here's Australia saying there shouldn't be social media accounts. They're trying to do something that has to do with what I'm talking about here. But what we do is we're as hardcore as you could possibly get. And it's made me a real advocate for all these different projects saying we should ban phones in schools. I'm a big advocate for all these things because I see the difference in how kids interact with one another when they don't have their phones around. And it's night and day.
I'm trying to promote the idea of doing a disconnected social event at Arival where you lock your phone up.
We had one accidentally last year. I don't know if
Oh,
you've
that's
heard
true.
about this,
Valencia.
Eric.
Yeah.
But in Valencia on the first night, there was no power and the cell phone towers went out. And our welcome party was at an orchard. And people had phones, but they were useless. They were worthless. They didn't do anything. And everyone, like the vibe
It was
of
the best.
people talking
good.
with each other and looking at each other. It was like pre-phone days, party vibe. And everyone was saying, this is so great. So I don't know if we need to arrange a power outage every year. But
Yeah. Eric, I am a huge camp advocate. I went to summer camp every year between grade 8 and grade 12. And those
you did? Oh, great.
Oh, yeah. I was in the Air Cadet program. So I went to Air Cadet camps every summer between 2 and 6 weeks. Like my last 2 years in camp, they were 6-week-long camps. And of course, this was pre-cell phones. So they are fantastic experiences, absolutely fantastic experiences. You make lifelong friends, you learn incredible skills, the ability to just talk to people, build relationships, deal with conflict resolution, all those sorts of things are invaluable skills for young people to learn. And to do that without access to tech, because that's how it was done before. And it's amazing. So I love the idea of a disconnected camp. I wish we had more of that.
Yeah, well, and also I wish that there was an easy way to put it more into the non-kid world. You guys saw the White Lotus last year. The very funny sort of subplot about taking all the phones away, and then my God, that became a plot point. I just don't know how possible it is to actually do that for people who are staying at these high-end resorts because people just feel the need to be connected all the time. Oh, and I'll tell you, one definite learning from the camping environment is it only works if everybody gives up their phones. That's a crucial part of things. Otherwise, it would just fall apart completely.
Yeah.
Which we see, by the way, on Visitors Day. Right? Visitors Day, we can't ban all the parents and older siblings and stuff from using their phones. And so suddenly the whole environment changes for a few hours while all the external people are on with their phones, and then boom, then it's gone again.
I want to go to camp.
Yeah. There are camps actually for adults. I have
it's never too late.
That go to these. They're not specifically silent retreats. That's a totally different thing, but they're disconnected.
I have done that. Yeah.
Yeah. They are disconnected camps. And yeah, it's just a digital. It's weird that we've gotten to the point where we have to have digital detox. Like it's very strange.
Yeah.
But that's the world we live in
at
now.
that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. I actually got to do a canoe trip last summer way up north in the Yukon on the Snake River with actually a great outfitter called Black Feather out of Ottawa that you guys might have heard of. Anyway, 2 weeks down the river, no cell towers, of course, anywhere nearby. So 12 straight days without a screen or connection. I was there with my dad, my sister, my son, and so on. And all there was to do, you're just around the campfire. And it was just glorious because I was thinking for all I go and promote the camp and, how we don't have phones and stuff, I hadn't actually done that in 5 or 6 years. And boy, is it ever fantastic. I wish there was a way we could get doctors to write a prescription for it. You must go somewhere for a week with no phone access. I think it's the cure for an awful lot of anxiety.
I think they're doing that in Sweden. I read an article about how the doctors can prescribe outdoor activity or something like that to people.
Oh, I love that. That's great.
The
That's
Scandinavian countries.
Yeah, I know.
great. Yeah,
Always a step
right.
ahead when it comes to that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So bringing it back to the trends and outlook, I don't know if this was on the list, even, but one of the things we're starting to see is a lot more mergers and acquisitions, IPOs happening in the experiences space. So Klook and My Real Trip both said they're going to do IPOs. Expedia acquired tickets,
I saw
big
that.
one in the experiences sector. Do you think that we're headed towards more consolidation in the travel experiences and tech space?
Well, I think yes and no. I think there's probably more consolidation and more tendency towards bigger players when you think about the aggregator or the OTA layer. Get your guide. I'm a believer. I think Airbnb will actually pull it off this time. I think Expedia is certainly showing that they take it very seriously with tickets. So I think the aggregator layer, yeah, I think fewer bigger companies that are really going to duke it out on the marketing side. On the ground, though, in terms of the actual operators, I guess I don't really see it. I understand that there is, of course, a return to scale. And if you develop expertise at running something like Hop On, Hop Off Bus or whatever it might be, it makes sense to be in a bunch of different markets. But it's hard for me to see big, broad. I don't think you're going to see the McDonald's of art history tours, for instance. It just doesn't lend itself to that to me. So I think the long tail is here to stay, which is great because it means it's a place for entrepreneurs to jump in. It's still a business in the travel industry that, despite all the modernization, everything that's happened, if you've got an interesting story to tell about your hometown, you can find a way to tell it and make a few bucks doing it with people who actually want to hear what you're saying. And that's just great. And that's not going to go away, I don't think, anytime soon. And so that makes me happy. So I do think more players, bigger at the high end, partly as a defense mechanism against the LLMs, right? And they're trying desperately how to figure out how to keep mind share. But down at the operating level, I think there's still tons of room for individual entrepreneurs, and I think there will be for them.
That's probably
Yeah,
good
that's good
news
news.
for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, the operators listening will be going, "Whew, okay.
No, but I think it stands to reason, right? I don't think it's
Yeah.
controversial.
Yeah. These are also companies that are not looking to at the operator level. These are small entrepreneurs, lifestyle businesses. They're looking to just build a business to sustain themselves and their families and leave some kind of legacy. They're not looking to be billion-dollar unicorns or whatever, for the most part.
Yeah, no,
yeah,
100%.
that tracks, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the smart, whether it's Viator or anybody else, the smart aggregators will do their best to give those folks tools to run their businesses, build their businesses. Like they'll add value above and beyond just the demand, which I think you're already seeing them sort of realize and start to say, boy, if we can actually add something, if we can make it easier for these folks to start and run their businesses on our platform, I guess, in accommodation, Airbnb set the standard for this. I think Viator, I think others are very good at this as well in the experience space. That's a way of really keeping that, nurturing that ecosystem of operators so that it doesn't have to consolidate down. So you can actually make a living doing it without having to get big. Because that's very important in this whole thing too. Because otherwise, if you didn't have the aggregators and you were just trying to hang a shingle on the big, broad internet, marketing gets very difficult very fast, right? So I think that the values at each level here is pretty well established. And I feel, if you can't tell, I feel very good about the health of the ecosystem here when it comes to experiences, but much more so than I do about mid-market lodging.
It's an interesting point because I've talked to a lot of operators and we always talk about growth, right? And here's how you can grow your business. But there's some operators out there who are like, I don't really want to grow. I'm good. I like what I do. I like the people who come to my company, who do the things. And there is that side that's like good at kind of the status quo level. So there are growth oriented companies for sure. But then there's a lot of companies who just love what they do and they want to keep it with this.
25% of the companies are like that, right? It's only 25% that actually have like active growth in mind.
Listen, we talked about Butterfield Robinson before, and George Butterfield is still a good friend of mine. He's the founder of the company. They've been in business for 45 years now? No, over 50, 60 years now, probably. Anyway, his motto has always been, we never wanted to be the biggest travel company, just the best. And he's just stuck with it. And they just don't add volume for volume's sake. They just don't do it. So they bang along. It's a great business, but just like you said, there's never been an ambition to be some big giant thing with all the issues that brings. Very different from a tech orientation, which I'm very familiar with from investing and from Expedia, where actually a lot of the time it doesn't really work unless you get really big. It's a whole different imperative, right? You're trying to figure out how much volume can you run across a fixed cost base? And it's a very different way of looking at things if you're running the sort of upper side of a marketplace, which is just as true in experiences. The different layers have very different incentives, I think.
Yeah, definitely. We wanted to talk a little bit about the leadership piece because you've been obviously in a leadership role for a lot of different companies and you're on a lot of boards now, as you were saying. And I'm wondering if looking back, if there's anything that stands out to you that you've learned along the way that you might want to pass on to some of the listeners and viewers who might be more up and coming leaders in the travel experiences space. What would you pass on to us?
It's an interesting question. You mean in terms of leadership lessons for people who are running companies?
Yeah, or just in general.
From your
like-
experience.
yeah.
Listen, I would say the thing that I guess I see over and over again, and it's almost a cliche, but as you're growing, you have to understand where are the places to innovate and where are the places that it's been done before, and there's really no point. And the best CEOs and leadership teams are the ones who kind of embrace the idea that there's kind of an operating system for businesses. It's not always the same. There's really coming up with a sort of fantastical org chart where people do jobs that nobody's ever heard of before, or put stuff together in a way that, oh, this is pretty risky, but maybe it'll work. Or, coming up with a comp structure that's completely different from everybody else in your industry because you're trying to be innovative, but not recognizing it's like, yeah, but the job offers they're getting are these standardized things from everybody else. So you're just putting yourself at a disadvantage. The place to innovate, the place to focus is on the experience that you deliver for your customers. And that's, as long as you stay really focused on that, most other stuff in business is pretty generic. You hate to say it, but it is. It's pretty mechanical. It's pretty generic. And a lot of it has to do with making sure you've got excellent people. And excellent people can sniff out really quickly whether you're actually organized or not, right? And whether you're actually doing things according to some kind of recognizable playbook. And so I would say, that I know it's a little bit of a cliche to say that focus on your customer is the most important thing. But boy, I tell you, especially in this experiences world, if you're not just totally focused on the experience you're providing and how it's different from what other people are providing and how that resonates with the people who are going to go with you, that human connection, like we were talking about before, the other stuff's not really going to matter very much. So leadership ends up being, how do you keep everybody focused on the important thing, which is the customer and what you can provide for them? And I've just never seen that go wrong. Probably the best entrepreneur I know is Rich Barton, the guy who started Expedia and then Zillow and co-founder at Glassdoor. And he's got a good line about how it all just comes down to power to the people, right? As long as you're focused on the people and making sure they get what they want, everything else will follow the way it should. And I believe that. I think that's true.
That's great advice, because one of the things that we see so often within the travel space, especially when we start talking about the larger companies, is that there's just so much focus on the bottom line, right? On profitability and on driving revenue, that the conversation about customer experience and what the customer is actually getting from this experience gets lost, because it's, they're just a means to an end to profitability or to shareholder value. And I think it's important. And I think the fact that you've pointed this out and given some very, very good examples of large scale, profitable companies that have a mindset that is focused on the customer experience, I think that's really important to remember for all of those companies that are out there, all of those CEOs that are out there that are under pressure to satisfy shareholder value, to think about your shareholder value and your profitability is driven by customer experience. If your customers aren't getting what they want, you're not going to be profitable or be able to provide that shareholder value. So I think that gets lost. Like, I don't hear it very often when I talk to people. And it's like, your customers are number one. Like, they're driving your profitability. So why aren't we talking more about them and how we can make those experiences better?
But I will say one of my criteria as I decide whether to join boards or not, whether to advise companies or not, is the CEO and sort of CEO adjacent, is that team really actually interested in the product, right? Are they product people? Is that how they live and die? The quintessential example being a guy like Steve Jobs, somebody who, there's just no question, that's what they're always going to monkey with. That's where they start and that's where they finish, is what's the product and do people really engage with the product? And that's a really interesting environment to be around. I have, in another life, maybe I would have been a hedge fund guy or something, but I just don't have interest in that kind of the financial engineering world. I understand it to how it works, and I think it's great for the people who like it. But Boy, give me a product focus every time. Much more.
No, I agree with you 100%.
Okay, so last question. This is again super easy question. If you could predict one big disruption in travel
Super easy
experiences,
question.
one big disruption in travel experiences in the next decade, what would it be?
Gosh, it seems almost too obvious. Listen, there will be some share of the experiences market taken away by some variation of an AI guide. That's going to happen. For all the reasons we've just talked about, I think in-person guide is much more what the experience is supposed to be about. But I wandered a lot of cities with my Lonely Planet guidebook back in the day. And I sort of liked doing that on my own and taking it on my own pace and so on. And I'm sure that there's right now tons of people who are trying to figure out how to make ChatGPT or whichever Claude work really well in that context and be a bit of a ride along. Right now, I don't know if you've ever tried doing it. I've tried it a couple of times. It's so annoying because they sit there going, in front of you is the Church of St. Andrew. Would you like me to describe the stained glass? No, just stop talking. So it certainly doesn't work yet. But I do think that'll be the big disruption. And the disruption will be simply because it will take away some of the market for sure. It'll make it a little tougher. These things are going to be very cheap, if not free, and they'll take some of it away. And that's going to be a bummer. But I don't think that's gravity that's going to happen for sure. And I think that'll be disruptive. But I will also just say, all these debates about, will it wipe out the market or will the aggregators get wiped out by the LLMs? And it makes for good copy. But the fact is, it's all just a game of percentages. And so some percentage of the market will go to the people who like to have an LLM kind of guided experience. And okay, that's fine. It won't take everything else away, but it might have some economic consequences. We'll see. But that to me is the sort of the most obvious thing coming.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of the argument that when the internet came along and OTAs like Expedia started taking up market share, that travel advisors and travel agencies would disappear, right? That they would die. And we still see today that travel advisors generate close to $500 billion worth of global bookings. So it's not like they've gone anywhere. They've just shifted and they've evolved. And that's true for parts of travel that will be affected by AI moving forward as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
one of the
but
reasons I joined-
nobody's using CD-ROMs though.
They're coming back. Millennials are like, they're buying up CD-ROMs and old CD players just for nostalgia. It's crazy.
Actually, that is true. That is true. Yeah, my kids are actually at a place where, they've got the vinyl for sure. I will say, Stephen, I do agree with you. One of the reasons I joined the board at Travel is precisely that. It's an advisor. It's a sort of a business in a box thing for advisors to be able to go and have a lot of really good tools to book travel for their friends and family, typically. And guess what? People love it. People really like having someone else help them book their travel. And if the platform can make that person super knowledgeable, well, great. It's a win for everybody. So I definitely agree. Everybody keeps on wanting things to be much more black and white than they are. It's just a human nature thing. But the truth is, everything just evolves and things tend to evolve together. So I still go to the theater sometimes. Who in 1950 would have predicted that there's still actual live action theater on Broadway? Most people would have said, impossible. Here we are.
Yeah. And they're making movies based on theater.
And they're right.
Yeah.
And they're making movies based. You can't make this stuff up.
Eric, thank you so much for being here. I wish we could keep talking forever, but we can't. So
very nice to talk to you guys. Thanks very much.
Yeah, you too, Eric. And I'm sure we'll catch up with you at one of the upcoming travel events.
No doubt.
So, Stephen, what stood out to you from that conversation?
You know what? It was something he said right at the beginning, like when he was talking about his background, that he had a degree in theater and a bachelor's degree in theater and wanted to travel the world. And so became a bike tour guide. Mm-hmm. And that was his gateway into the travel industry. And just reinforced the idea that honestly, it doesn't matter what you do in school, just do something and get out and travel the world, right?
Yeah.
Like your life starts when you experience the world in a way that you haven't been able to. Everybody, in my opinion, everybody should travel. Everybody should experience a different culture, a different part of the world. And because it just opens your eyes up to what makes us all human and what makes us different. And you could tell by talking to him, he's a
Yeah.
really empathetic person, and he's
Yeah.
an empathetic leader. Like, he puts people first. And we see that a lot in travel, I think, just because of the nature of travel. And he even said it, he's a product person. He is like, he's
Yeah.
about the customer experience. He doesn't care as much, or isn't necessarily interested in as much about the financial manipulation and all that sort of stuff. And I really admire that. I think we need more leaders like that are really focused on how does this impact people. And
Yeah. Well, then it came through in how he was talking about how he decides if he is going to join a board, because he's on all
yeah,
these boards now. And he's less concerned about maybe some of those financial details, although that stuff's important, more concerned about, do these people actually care about what they're doing and what they're
yeah.
making or what they're providing? And I thought that was a great perspective. That's a great way to look at it. Yeah.
And the fact that he owns a summer camp
Yes. That's so cool.
for kids, right?
Yeah.
He gets to impact
Yeah.
in a positive way 500 kids a year,
Yeah.
right? What a great legacy.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And it's interesting because summer camp is not the travel industry, but the question of how do you get kids to engage with each other in this world where we're so online all the time is super relevant to the travel experiences sector. How do you provide experiences that get adults out of being addicted to screens? And none of us really want to be addicted to screens, but we are. And so how do you offer experiences that people are like, yes, I want to get into the real world again. I want to meet actual humans from other cultures and have what you were describing earlier, those mind-opening experiences that make you a more empathetic person, make you a better human in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's true. Those are
Yeah.
skills that don't come naturally,
Yeah.
necessarily. I think we're tuned to be that way because we're social creatures. But you need to practice those skills. And for kids to be able, we saw this with the pandemic, that kids came out of the pandemic without the skills to be able to socialize with other kids, with other people. They just had no way of, like, they were anxious. They didn't trust people. They didn't have that human connection. This is like, to have summer camp experiences like this. And for me, this was really important. I'm sure you experienced this too with summer camp, is that you were put into a situation where you had to learn to work with people and to make friends quickly and to connect with people and find ways to connect with people quickly so that you could build trust, right? Because there is an inherent trust that you need to have in groups in order to feel safe.
Yeah.
And you need to find ways to build that trust with people and to be vulnerable and to build the group dynamic so that you can get through the rest of the summer. And that's what summer camps really help foster. It's huge.
And because everything you just said was making me think of being a tour guide for multi-day tours. That happens in the tour environment as well, especially when you're with people for a longer period of time. And that would happen. And so it was great that Erik brought up the summer camp thing, but also going back to this idea, this trend or whatever you want to call it, that we're going to be facing of AI versus human things in the travel experiences world. It's like some things are moving towards AI, and yet here we are as humans wanting to have human experiences, and how that kind of tension is really going to shape things going forward. I thought it was interesting that you mentioned trust, because we talked about trust in the last episode with Haley, about how trust is going to become, or is becoming, even more important to travelers, because now that there's so many different options of how to book your travel, who to book your travel with, what things to do, there's this element of needing to be able to trust the person or the AI or whoever you're interacting with in that process going forward.
Yeah, trust. Do we really trust the algorithm? On that note, we bring this amazing episode with Erik Blachford to a close.
We thank you for trusting us with your time.
with your valuable time. We hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, please share it with your friends and colleagues. We'd really appreciate that. For more information about upcoming events like Valencia and the Arrival 360 in Spokane, check out the website at Arival.Travel. And we'll see you next time on another episode of The Best Part
The
of
best
Travel.
part of travel.
The
Oh, I
best
thought
part
we
of travel.
were okay. Okay.
Thanks, Janelle.
Bye.